Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, the article I will be discussing is Crime Up North, the Case of Norway, Finland, and Iceland by Björn, Ægir, Norðfjörð. Norðfjörð introduces the article by discussing the unfortunate overshadowing of these Nordic countries' crime film histories by their internationally recognized neighbors, Sweden and Denmark. Before he fully enters the discussion of these countries' crime films, he defines the terms used in constructing the rest of his argument. The specific terms that he investigates are components of the label Nordic noir. These terms are noir and police procedural. These definitions are important throughout his article as they contextualize the films within their specific cinematic language. For this reason, I've decided to write down some of the aspects of noir and police procedurals in more basic, simplistic terms. Noir can be considered critical. This means that the justice system is not necessarily considered the heroic force in the plot. It is French in origin and is often used to describe American film adaptations of crime novels. Private detectives were usually the protagonists, and dark criminal accounts were also used for narratives. Police procedurals are considered complicit by Norðfjörð. They emphasize teamwork and putting trust in the law, often with the protagonist being a police officer themselves. Police procedurals were the bedrock for Scandinavian crime films, as they were the most popular in Denmark and Sweden, the giants of Nordic genre films. Next, I will be discussing Norðfjörð's aims, the first of which is, quote, to account for the international, literary and filmic origin of recent Norwegian, Finnish, and Icelandic crime films and television series, as well as their particular local specificity, end quote. The next is to look at these films in relation to the aforementioned giants of Nordic genre films, Sweden and Denmark, and to look at them in relation to the international crime film as well. The international crime film is typically associated with Hollywood and is almost entirely unspecific in terms of setting. Because of this, we can contrast international crime films with films that are specific to the country in which they were made. The first country that Norðfjörð discusses is Norway. He begins by introducing Erik Skjoldbjørg's Insomnia as the first bona fide Nordic crime film made outside of Sweden and Denmark to reach international audiences on a large scale. It received praise and was remade in Hollywood with Christopher Nolan as its director. This film was not adapted from a novel, but it still contained various features of noir films and crime novels that are often seen in adaptations. One particular feature that the author draws attention to is the importance of subjectivity within the narrative. Norðfjörð then describes the plot of the film. Though this film is in no ways a police procedural, the protagonist of the story is an officer, albeit an untraditional one. Engström, played by Stellan Skarsgård, is a dark character who, as Norðfjörð describes, antisocial, rude, out of shape, depressed, and an alcoholic anti-hero, and has an unwavering moral compass. Many of these aspects are often seen in noir. In the following clips from Insomnia's trailer, we can see how the main character is portrayed in film.
Han är kall, han är beräknande, man tror att han är intelligentare än polisen.
Jag är glad för att det var du som blev tillkallt.
Hva er det som gjør at ikke du informerer meg? Vi er nødt til å samarbeide her.
Norðfjörð also noted the stylistic and narrative aspects central to noir that are adapted in Insomnia. This corresponds with the film's local specificity, as even though the threatening atmosphere of Engström's environment harkens back to the dark and seedy settings common in noir, it is still very much Norwegian. We see this in the endless brightness of Norwegian summer that keeps Engström awake and anxious, leading to a psychological instability in our protagonist, something common in art cinema. The local specificity of Insomnia can be compared with the internationality of Headhunters. Headhunters is another Norwegian crime film, but focuses on the stories of two criminals rather than the typical good guy figures like the dedicated detective or private investigator.
Du har kandidat.
Lave de her mikroskopiske sender.
Northfjord notes that this film could happen just about anywhere, as the majority of the settings are nondescript and corporate. This aligns with the style of the film as well. It is fast-paced and smoothly edited without a hint of subjective personality that we see in noir films that focus on the perspective of the brooding hero. However, the characters are still noir-ish, as they include a morally suspect protagonist and a hardly a sympathetic one, devious femme fatales, and a focus on crime from the criminal's perspective. Next, we see what Northfjord defines as the true Norwegian heir to the American noir tradition, the Varg Vem series of novels written by Gunnar Staalsen. Though the novels are quite similar to American noirs, there are some aspects that depart from that. First off, Varg Vem is a sympathetic character, as he used to be a social worker. Next, in the film and television adaptations, there is more of a cooperation between Vem and the law enforcement. This, therefore, pushes the work closer to the category of police procedural. Finland's fictional detective of choice, Jussi Vares, is compared with Vem. Jussi Vares was a literary character as well until 2004 when the first Vares film was released. Another followed in 2007, but in 2011 Vares was moved into Finnish homes through a television series that ran from 2011 to 2015. Both the Vares and Vem series do indeed nod to their national origin in terms of setting and stereotype, but according to Northfjord, this is about as far as it goes. The crimes are, quote, by and large generic in nature, end quote. Also, they both interact with the police force. Vares, however, is definitely a more noir protagonist. He is gruff, a drinker, and someone who does what he wants regardless of instructions given to him. Keeping this in mind, we can see the difference between the two detectives quite clearly in the following clip.
Mitäs tää? Ai vittu! Vittu itsellesi, mä en todellakaan tarkoita niitä juomioita mua viime. Saatanani aulasta tarjolla. Etkä sä mihinkään kuole, nuori vasikka noin pieneen kuole.
Next, Northfjord introduces another literary character that has been central to Finland's crime fiction tradition. Matti Urajena Jonsu's police detective Timo Harajenpa has also been the subject of television adaptation and cinematic one too. The film that Northfjord discusses is Priest of Evil, a literary adaptation that borrows the noir element of moral ambiguity, aligning the protagonist with the antagonist. Also, the subjective experience of the protagonist is amplified and the setting is dark and eerie. This focus on more traditional noir elements minimizes the locality of the film, placing it in what Northfjord calls a generic universal noir city rather than the specific location of Helsinki. This clip can help us contextualize the movie within a global crime film framework more so than a Scandinavian one, as it uses big-budget melodramatic Hollywood crime and action movie tropes.
Kuka pystyy määrittelemään, mikä on tyhjä ja mikä ei?
Mitä olisi vaikka poliisilaki?
Sepä se. Suomen laki. 10 käskyä.
Because of the protagonist's profession, this narrative is considered a police procedural. However, due to the injection of noir elements, it is differentiated from other police procedural crime films. In fact, Iceland is partial to the police procedural. This could be because of the size of the country, as Northfjord points out. He claims that in saying Iceland is too small and too innocent a location for crime fiction, that's false. But saying Iceland is too small for private detectives is probably pretty accurate. Iceland's first popular crime film, Jar City, does indeed focus on a police detective and his exploration of a specifically Icelandic murder.
Það vantar í hana heilan.
Hvar eru svona heilar kindir?
Krukkuborg.
Krukkuborg.
This is important to Norðfjörð, because although there are international crime film features like chases, prison escapes, and stereotypical noir characters, the crime itself is completely local. The murder being investigated by our protagonist, Detective Erlendur, is dependent upon Icelandic historical practices, particularly the documentation of the population's various genetic makeups. City State, another Icelandic crime film that came out in 2011, is completely overtaken by international ambiguity. Norðfjörð argues that in only a few years since Jar City's release, the transition from the national to the international and Icelandic crime film has been completed. City State is a result of this. Its complicated plot and excess of international crime films' stylistic, narrative, and character tropes turn it into a movie that could have been made anywhere. The only Icelandic thing about it seems to be the language spoken.
Come out and play, let's have some fun. Take off the rules and ruin the schools. How will they know which ones are the fools? And swallow the pit.
Norðfjörð notes that this film is indebted to gangster movies more so than noir or police procedural, despite the police centrality to the plot. Police procedurals to Norðfjörð appear to have diminished almost entirely in Iceland. Norðfjörð concludes with two ideas. The first is the obvious lack of police procedural films in these Nordic countries, and the second is the shift from national to international idioms in order to secure some type of success abroad.